Today we have, at the continuation of the 12th chapter of Mark's Gospel, another look at what it means to be an insider and what it means to be an outsider, what we might call the continuation of Jesus' Jerusalem farewell tour, the conversations and the conflicts that he has had with those who see themselves as insiders and those who see themselves as outsiders. Jesus lifts up in the first part of this story one that would surely see himself as an insider, a religious leader of the day, a very respected one, and an outsider, a widow. Jesus reverses this concept of inside and outside, turning our understandings of goodness and grace on their heads in the way he puts these two together. The scribes that he warns us about are those, he says, have an outward focus. Those who ask, what do I look like? What will people think of me before they make a decision or take an action? Those who have authority by their title and who are always asking themselves, how can I use my position to get what I want? The scribe, Jesus says, loves the special invitation. I couldn't help but think about, as I think about the authority and the special invitation, about a badge that sits in the windshield of the vehicle that I drive, whichever vehicle that is, whenever I remember to change that. It is a badge that says City of Fayetteville Police Department. And in small letters on that hardly anybody ever sees, it says chaplain. Nobody ever pays attention to the chaplain part. They just see the badge. And I leave it in the windshield there. You never know when you might want a special invitation not to get a high-speed driving award, right? That's the scribe. The scribe who offers long prayers, Jesus says. Today we're going to have short prayers. The scribe who wears the long robes and the flowing tassels. The long prayers that tend to be more a flowering garden of pretentious theological vocabulary, just like those words right there, instead of a fruit tree of spiritual and emotional connection to the real lives of hurting people. Widows' houses are devoured by this scribe, Jesus says. What does that mean? Quite simply, I think it means loving things and using people instead of the other way around. And then the widow is offered up as one that Jesus would say is the insider and not the outsider. Does she have an inward focus as opposed to the outward focus? We're not told. Does she have any authority, and if so, how does she use it? Mark and Jesus don't bother to tell us that either. Is she among the invited, or would she be among the uninvited? We probably know the answer to that one. But what do we know about her prayers? What are they like? Mark, Jesus, don't tell us. We don't know anything about her house, whether she has one or not. We aren't told any of these things. The only thing we are told is that, at least metaphorically, she puts her 2 cents worth in the temple offering. Jesus has little concern really for the amount she gives, except as it relates to what she has kept. You see, Jesus, I think, in this passage is saying that it's not so much that our gifts to the church, however large or small they are a theological statement, a testament to what we believe about God and religion, as it is that our whole bank statement is a testimony of our faith. Not just what we give to church, but what we use and how we use everything that we have. Our congregation for many years before I got here, has had 4 stewardship principles that we usually lift up during the month of September on each of the Sundays when there are 4 of those. We lift up one of each of those every Sunday in September. This year, we actually moved our stewardship month to October, because we were having so much fun in September doing all of our celebrating that we decided we wanted to have Stewardship Month in October, and now that's gone, and we don't have anybody talking about that. And we didn't even mention the 4 stewardship principles, except I think on the very first Sunday, it was mentioned that you weren't going to hear about those this year. Well, guess what? We're going to talk about those today, because I think they apply directly to this passage. 4 stewardship principles are very basic. It is about how and why we give, not what we give. And these are the 4 principles, one word each. Freely, proportionately, systematically, and sacrificially. Freely, proportionately, systematically, sacrificially. So what does it mean to give freely? Well, you can look at the piece of paper that's in every session member's notebook and find out what it means as we describe that as one of our 4 stewardship principles. But I think the basic meaning of what it means to give freely is that we are supposed to give because we need to give, not because God or the church needs us to give. That is, an understanding is that we give because giving transforms who we are in a way that not giving cannot do. Did you get that? Giving transforms who we are in a way that not giving cannot transform us. Proportionately. Number 2. Do you ever think about the places and the ways that people object to giving proportionately? A lot of ways where we're okay with giving proportionately. I mean, you never hear somebody say, or at least I never have, that the sales tax on that Ruth's Chris dinner for 2, not to mention the tip, is way bigger than dinner for 4 at Taco Bell. We understand the proportionality of that. But there are some places where we don't like proportionality, where proportionality doesn't work for us. Years ago, I heard a story of a middle-aged man, let's call him Joe, I don't even remember what his name was, who made an appointment to come and speak to his pastor during the week. Oh, you know that's not going to turn out well. He made an appointment to come speak with his pastor, and the pastor had no idea what he was coming for. And he came and he talked to the pastor. He said, "Let me tell you a story." He said, "Pastor, years ago when I was a teenager in this church, and you preached a sermon about stewardship." And I know the pastor was thinking, "You remember that? Wow, it's pretty amazing. You preached a sermon about stewardship, and I decided right then and there that I wanted to give a tithe, that is 10% of my income." Now, I was playing ball and I was in school, and so I was only making about $100 a month way back then. And so every month I put $10 in the plate. And I felt really good about what I was learning from doing that. And he said, then I graduated, I went to college, I wasn't playing ball anymore, I had a few more hours to work, I was putting myself through college, I was working a little more, and I was making about $1,000 a month. And I decided I would continue, and I would put $100, that's 10%, right? $100 in the plate. And then he said, but about 10 years after I graduated from college, I got a really good job, and I was making $10,000 a month. And the preacher said, yes. And he said, I just couldn't write that $1,000 check. So the pastor sat there for a minute thinking that the conversation would continue, and he said, well, what would you like for me to do? And he said, I want you to pray for me. And the pastor said, okay, I'll pray for you. And there was silence again. And the pastor stood up thinking, this conversation was over. He said, no, I want you to pray for me right now. And the pastor said, what would you like me to pray for? He said, I would like you to pray that I would be able to be a tither again. And the pastor said, I had no idea how to pray about that. And the only thing I could think of, I said out loud, oh Lord, please reduce Joe's income because he wants to become a tither again. Proportionality is what we say is a stewardship principle. Systematically, number 3, plan your gift and gift your plan. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, in mostly an agrarian society where food was grown and raised, and that became the barter crop, and the way that people supported and showed their faith was by giving their fruits. The idea of the first fruits, the first fruit of the land, was what was lifted up as the way to be faithful. I guess you could say that would be saying God prefers your grapes to your raisins. Don't wait until it's all dried up. And I remember, 10, 12, 13 years ago, hearing Martha Mulholland talk about moving to Nashville as a fairly young lady working for the first time, living away from home, and deciding that she was going to give the first part of what she got paid in her work to the church and not wait to see if there was any left over at the end. The only thing I can say about why we are asked to use first fruits is because it works. Grapes work better than raisins. And the fourth principle is sacrificially, the most difficult. Some people say, give till it hurts. I assume meaning it hurts to give. I say no. Some people say, give till it helps. I assume that means others. I say no. Give every time and to the degree that you recognize that God has gifted you with grace and maybe even life itself. That is sacrificial giving. For the outsider who looks in to someone who is a sacrificial giver, it is crazy. It is unreasonable. We look at somebody who gives sacrificially, and from the outside we say, that woman's crazy. That guy is crazy. But it reminds me of a story that I heard on the news multiple times just a week or so ago about the response to the storm, Superstorm Sandy in the Northeast. And even ESPN had this story on the news and was just really raving about this. The New York Yankees donated $500,000 to help the victims of Superstorm Sandy. And I was thinking, wow, that is a lot of money. And then I realized that they pay Alex Rodriguez that much to strike out and flirt with women in the stands every month. Sacrificially, probably not for the Yankees. You know when you go home at the end of the day, and if you've actually spent cash that day, which, with the debit card checks and stuff like that, we don't do a whole lot. But if you got that change in your pocket, you got that place in the closet, on the floor, in the dresser, wherever it is that you throw that in. And the next day when you get ready to go back out, you don't want to pick that back up again. Carry it around in your pocket, have it jingling around, making noise during the day. $500,000 to the Yankees, that's probably pocket change. Stuff they didn't want to bother carrying around to spend somewhere else. When I looked it up just to make sure of the story, I Googled $500,000 New York Yankees give to disaster relief. Turns out they gave the exact same amount a year ago when there were tornadoes somewhere else. Pocket change. Not really sacrificially. Giving sacrificially is really moves us beyond the concept of investment, moves us toward the realm of faith and trust. So when we talk about our giving, first of all, let us disabuse ourselves of the notion of what has been called the prosperity gospel, what I really think would be more appropriately called the gospel of the United States of America, that stewardship is somehow an investment strategy in God. That if you give God $1,000 this year, by the end of next year, your bank account will miraculously have $1,100 or even more in it than it had before. Because the outcome of stewardship is a life-changing shift in perspective. Letting go of or gathering everything for self, that is time and possessions and skills, frees us to recognize everything as a gift from God. Let us also disabuse ourselves of the need to match what the widow does, or what anyone else does for that matter, because stewardship is not a competition. When we see someone else who finds true joy in letting go of more than we can imagine doing without, the path to generosity is not necessarily emulation, it is celebration. It's about the joy of generosity. It is not about competing to see who can be more generous. Years ago, someone who was able to give an unexpected gift to the church and who wanted to do so anonymously had a conversation with me about that because they were asking for a particular need that the church might have. They had no idea what they wanted to do. Their response to me as we had that conversation is something that I think I will probably always hold on to as they were thinking about giving this and really not wanting anybody to know about it. They said, "I never feel wealthier than when I can give something away to someone else." Now, you've heard all about money. The Yankees and $500,000 and 2 silver coins. And it sounds like this story is all about the money. And money is a nice place to visit, but you really don't want to live there. If what you're seeing about this story, about our 4 stewardship principles, about this sermon is money, you need to look deeper. That is on the surface. That is how we get into the conversation. But the depth and the importance of the story is much deeper than that. It is about relationships. It is about connection. It is about communion. And it is about community. You see, the first part of the story is about how the widow's house is devoured by the scribes. It is about the relationship between the institutional religious leaders of the day and this woman who comes and gives everything. It is not about the size of either one of their gifts. It is about how we are all connected to one another. I will leave you with words written some years ago called "Giving to Live." We fool ourselves if we buy the myth of bling, that is security. Because all models of security driven by greed and fear and scarcity are self-diminishing. They diminish us and they diminish themselves. The only hope we have for fulfillment, joy, peace, is in sacrificing for others because we recognize them as neighbors in need. The need for giving to and serving others is one of the oldest, most basic of human needs, and we bury that sometimes in our consumption. It is in sharing that we become fully human. In giving that we expand God's intended community. It is in sacrificing that we approach wholeness. It turns on its head our notions of inside and outside, grace, mercy, love, and forgiveness. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.